in the country. And most of us, 99% of what we're impacted by are the down ballot races, like Linda said. So a lot of these local races are important. And I think for looking ahead, it shouldn't just be we're voting for these down ballot races. A lot of them go uncontested, where nobody submits in a nomination for themselves and nobody runs for the position. We need to get into that. And this past year, we saw a number of city councils do ceasefire resolutions. A number of school boards do ceasefire resolutions. It's not coincidence that AIPAC now has a spinoff, which they're dumping tens of millions of dollars into for 2 years from now or a year from now that they're going to use on city council races. Mm-hmm. They understand and the importance of these local races. And look at any anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian bill or any anti-BDS or boycott bill. Where do they start? They don't start at Congress. They don't just introduce something in the Senate. They start at a local level. They're going to start at a county level or a city level, work their way up. And then ultimately, once the state gets it, and then it gets federal. Right. So it's very important to understand that strategy. It's important to understand the grasp some of our opponents or folks that don't view us favorably have on a lot of these state legislators. Mm-hmm. And then one final thing. Look, one of the end games, in all of this is getting enough states that are in Republican control to have a constitutional convention where you can freely amend the Constitution any way you want. That is now, depending on how this election goes, a lot of con law professors and experts are like, this is in the realm of possibilities. Mm-hmm. This isn't anymore something, last time this happened was 300 years or so ago. This could happen in our lifetime, in the next decade or so. Mm-hmm. So what happens on these state levels, we'll put an end to that. So that's a very important conversation we've got to have.
This is what I call the Medina model for Muslims. Mm-hmm. This prophetic example where we cultivate our local power before we focus on Persia and Rome. We have to take care of Medina. So we all have our respective Medinas in different parts of the country, and there has been a massive vacuum of infrastructural development for Muslims to understand this kind of information, this kind of rhetoric. How do we build that?
That's right.
And because we show up every 4 years, and even that is not like we show up overtly too much, right? How do we ensure that we are consistently engaged within our political decisions, within our communities?
I think it starts with local groups like Amin. I mean, you're basically a solution to a long-standing problem in our Muslim American communities. We've created a vacuum and given space to some people and organizations that may not necessarily align with the larger kind of sentiment of our larger community. And we've spent a lot of resources, and I don't, of course, criticize our community for this because this is how generous our people are. They've spent millions and millions, probably billions of dollars on charity for, Palestine, for Yemen, for, African countries. Whenever there's a natural disaster, and alhamdulillah, our community are the first people to stand up. Right. They will support black churches. They will support undocumented people. They'll support people at the border. We are such generous people. And what I wish for our community and to help build this infrastructure is, I don't want people to stop giving to charity. I want you to continue to uplift our people. But can we make a pact? Maybe a quarter of what you're donating towards charity and towards lifting the most marginalized people around the world is also going to political work and to organizing political work and supporting organizations that do political advocacy, because we do need that. And guess what? Our opposition does that. Our opposition is supporting causes that are important to their community, and they're also putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to politics. And that's our job to do. We cannot wait for anybody else to do that for us. We got to do that for ourselves. But also other information, Rex, and I debate with the community all the time. And, as you said, I try as much as possible to be sincere. Even when I'm wrong, I want to be sincerely wrong, right? In the sense that I don't mean to harm or to in any way, debate people just for the sake of debating. Mm-hmm. For example, we do know that whoever is the president in the United States of America, when there are open Supreme Court seats, they are the ones who appoint those. Yeah. And so we have to keep things like that in mind. Sometimes when we're voting, it's not just this idea of like, we don't want to keep voting for lesser of two evils. That's not always the conversation, right? Even though we probably might have the lesser of two evils for the next 50 years. I don't know. This
Correct.
Party, come on, folks.
You have to change the conversation at some point.
Yeah. And at some point, we want to say to people like, look, like right now, when the Muslim ban happened and we went to the Supreme Court, And now we are in a space where there are a majority, quote, conservatives on the Supreme Court. And I don't even mean conservatives in the way we talk about conservatives in our community and what that means, but people who are generally anti our community, right? And so we as Muslims don't have a lot of respite anywhere. Like even to the Supreme Court level, we've lost many times on that level as well. And so I just say to people, like, you know, thinking about federal judges. So the president, not only are they able to appoint judges, Supreme Court judges on the Supreme Court, but they also appoint federal judges on the state benches across the country. So for example, just one statistic is when Donald Trump was the president and during those 4 years, he appointed 1 out of every 4 federal judge in this country. Now, there's a lot of situations where some of these judges have views that don't align with our community in general. And so again, thinking about who do we want to appoint judges? And I'm not saying we're all going to agree on that, but it's not even a question that comes up as part of what does the president do, right? Because we also know that if we think presidents put forth laws, it's not the president who does the laws, it's the Congress who, the president signs or vetoes, right, the law. But then there are things that the president can do in forms of executive orders, right? And so like I'm always, to your point, what I want to see is I want to see institutions in our community who are getting into the technicalities, right? What is the role of the president? What does the president do? What's the role of Congress? How do you pass a bill in Congress? How many members of Congress do you need to pass something out of a committee, for example? These are basic questions, Rex, that I promise you 90% of our community does not know the answer to. And to your point, whose responsibility is that for our community to know that? That's our responsibility. But in order to do that and reach the masses, we need the resources. So people have to say, okay, who's the organization in my local community that is doing this work, right? So maybe in Georgia, for example, it's the Georgia Muslim Voter Project. In Michigan, let's say it's Amin and Amin Action. Let's say in another city, it's the Muslim Civic Coalition. In another city, we do have good organizations doing really good work. So some of us are national organizations. Some of us do national voter guides and do provide access to checking voter registration and giving people, you know, policy papers, like here's a one-pager on immigration reform. This is what we're passing. What's the law that we're supporting? So again, I'm just saying that at some point we need self-reflection. And I appreciate you, Rex, and I mean, starting to ask those questions, right? And starting to do at the mosques, like this is what the conversation needs. And I'll just end with this and say, I get frustrated personally with the whole every 4 years thing. I want to see there's like sometimes in Michigan, wallahi, there's 3 elections in 1 year. There's primary elections and there's a special election and then there's this election. And
Michigan has elections every
year.
Every year.
Yeah.
Sometimes 3 times a year.
Yep.
And so I want to see, inshallah, this is where we're going from here. And you know, and maybe it's okay. Like we're not going to keep going to the past and saying we could have, we should have. Khalas, the past is the past. But I hope now, in the midst of a genocide, in the midst of watching how we have been disregarded by every political party, by everyone, in particular those in power, even some who are representing our districts around the country, right? So sometimes we have members of Congress who represent high populations of Muslims, but they're not, for example, supporting our issues. I hope this is a wake-up call to Muslims to say, wait a minute, they work for us. And you know what? As an employer, I'm going to fire and hire. And I think our community has to once and for all never underestimate their power, and for us to demonstrate our power. But that's going to require us going outside to the polls.
Look, I mean, I think we have to build on our communities, and the infrastructure needs to be there, and it's been lacking for a number of years. But Linda brought up and touched on a lot of great points on how to do that. But it does come down to resources. We need the infrastructure and getting the resources to the local organization entities that are doing the work. And we need to also implement resources in local communities that drive economic empowerment. We need to start getting our folks, you know, giving them opportunities, economic opportunities, which will lend that they're creating on their own, allow them to speak out. What we've seen in the past years is many people didn't, the past year, a lot of people didn't want to speak out, a lot of people didn't want to organize or get involved because they were afraid of losing their job, or they were afraid of backlash at work, right? So we have to give this ecosystem within our own. Dearborn is a perfect example. Dearborn has billions of dollars of peer-to-peer transactions in that city each year. So they're isolated. They can speak freely, the business owners can donate freely, they can, and not be afraid of giving to an organization or an entity. So I think the economic part of it is a serious conversation. It's not always a comfortable one, but it's one we need to have. And then the other part of it is getting involved in the issues locally. You know, I think it was mentioned earlier, like getting involved with labor, getting involved in other, you know, areas. The judgeships is so important. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but, you know, early on in the Biden administration, we were close to having in Michigan an Arab American woman judge. But basically, you know, what she was told, now's not the time for an Arab woman to be judge. So it's like, okay, when is the time, right?
Right.
We have to make sure that the next administration, it is the time, regardless of who comes in. And that's the other thing. Respectful conversations grounded in community and principle with all parties. I personally see nothing wrong with that. You know, if you come in, this is how the community feels. We're grounded on principle. And you know what? You have some judicial nominations open up. Here are some judges from our community or attorneys from our community we'd like to see, right? And it has to be done coordinated. It has to be done with all the people in the room, coordinating, talking, and going over, and keeping that conversation going where it's not once every 4 years. Like it has to be quarterly or regular updates and check-ins locally about what everybody's doing. And lastly, I would say, and then this worked at ADC, and again, most of my work is within the Arab community, of course, a lot of overlap. Just grounding yourself on principle and what you believe is right is just, you're gonna get a head start already with others that are not doing that. And
That's right.
That is like the number one guiding, you know, shining light for us is we have to ground ourselves on principle. If our community does not agree with this, or even if you personally don't agree with it, we're not gonna issue it, we're not gonna say it, right? So that's such a key factor. And we're missing a lot of that. And too often we see locally people will, you know, they're attracted by the limelight or the attention they're getting, and they like it, and they may deviate from where the principles are. And when they do that, they undermine and undercut this whole group of people. You know,
And part of that, I think, is because, well, number one, there's no community accountability, not to the fault of the community, to the fault of us, actually, who haven't necessarily built it properly over the past 20 years, right? And when I'm saying us, I'm not saying me, you, or Linda. I'm saying who the community entrusted with this responsibility, right? So it really goes back to this lacking infrastructure that we have to analyze and break apart very closely following November 5th and see what can be done. But I wanna pivot a little bit to the kind of sentiment that the general Muslim public has had with regards to the shifting political conversation that is happening, which is a reality, right? We have been solidly going one way. Now we are no longer, I don't think we've ever been a monolith, to be honest, but we are starting to see fractures happening within the community regarding political conversations that realistically might be there regardless of who wins in the future for good, right? So how do we speak to this idea of we've been in survival mode for 20 years, right? How do we get out of survival mode?
You know, I said this, you know, earlier, Rex, and it's like, it's the thing that is, I don't know how to even describe the feeling, but it's really been hurting my spirit. Like it's, like there's something in my heart that is just, it's unsettled. And it's because, you know, this back and forth conversation, these fractures in our community. And what we want from our community is really more so for us to be on the same page of what we want. What are the demands that we have as a community? Regardless of who's in political office, at the very least, we should all be clear on what it is that we want.
Right.
So for example, whether you're supporting, you know, a Jill Stein for third party, whether you're voting, you know, supporting Kamala Harris or whoever you're supporting, even for members of, or a member of Congress or whatever you're, you know, you're going out publicly with, what are you asking for? And that's the thing that I think for me is, it's not about, I don't even care who people vote for. If your reasoning behind it is something that feels like you're building some sort of power, or at least the demands are clear and unequivocal, I'm cool with that. That's the part that I'm not seeing. I'm not seeing okay, for example, Kamala Harris goes to the White House, right? What's the demand?
Right.
What are the people supporting Kamala Harris saying to her? Here's what
What are the concessions? Yeah.
Come on. Same thing with, you know, even those who in our community, the very tiny, I want to make sure this is clear. It's not a majority of our community that's supporting Donald Trump, even though the media has made it seem like that with all the coverage. But even for those people who are going outside, you know, saying we're now voting for Donald Trump because we think that Donald Trump is going to end the war. What's the concessions you made? What's the exact thing that's happening? This plateaus of we're going to stop the war, and even, you know, what does that mean? Tell me. I need to know what the policy is that you're asking for and you're demanding, regardless of what candidate you're talking to. You know, we do this all the time, Rex, in our community, where people will raise $150,000 in one night for a congressional candidate, right?
Yep.
You just giving
Giving
free
money,
money
yeah.
away.
Where's the concessions?
No other group in this country raises 100, 150 in one gathering without saying, in order for us to give you this money, here are the things that we care about, and here are the things we're expecting from you.
Right.
And then we get all upset when those members of Congress go and vote for more military aid to Israel. And I'm like, did you ever actually say to them, hey, I'm doing this fundraiser for you, but I'm just letting you know right now, before we do it, you have to be very unequivocal and clear that you will not be supporting additional military aid to Israel. For example, that's just one example.
Right, right.
So I think what I, in order for us to, number one, survive and build political power, it's not just about getting people to the polls. It is strategically organizing a block of people towards concessions and clear demands. And that's what we don't have in our community oftentimes. And even if some do, because there are some strategic organizers in our community that know how to, navigate and leverage those spaces. There are some. But if we're not all on the same page, they're not going to be, those people have no influence without the rest of the majority of the community. And that's the thing that I think we have to learn how to do better and do it together.
I mean, that's exactly right. Look, we are in survival mode. We've been in survival mode, but we do have to change the way we do things to go on the offensive. We can't just sit back and say, well, this is the way it's done. This is the way we're going to do it. After November 5th, after the election, there needs to be a serious conversation and look at what we can keep doing, what needs to change. Giving freely 6 figures to a candidate without demands that needs to stop. Focusing on the local election, local races, that needs to continue. And then back to the demands as well. They do need to have some demands on domestic items. Like, it can't just be we're going to stop.
Right.
So at ADC, 2 of our demands for both campaigns has been that the next Department of Education Office of Civil Rights, the civil rights officer, needs to be an Arab or a Palestinian or Muslim lawyer, right? That's something with everything going on in the school. Like that's an ask we give and we're pushing for. That's a different type of ask. Same thing with the DOJ's, U.S. Attorney on Civil Rights. Should be an attorney from our community or an ally attorney that has stood up for civil rights of Arabs and Muslims in that position. So start thinking in a way, and really also understanding not just like how bills are introduced and how they work, but how government works. Completely how government works. The ins, the outs, the different agencies, the different departments, the access you have to, I was talking to a business owner earlier today who does so much import and export of unique products, but he's never heard of the Import-Export Bank. He's never heard that Arabs are recognized as a disadvantaged minority in that bank, and there's special programs, right? So we have to understand how government works for us, what programs we could take advantage of, where we can fit ourselves in, and then also continue putting pressure on the candidates and having it, in a more organized fashion. And I think the third leg, once you start doing those few things, then begin recruiting candidates. Then begin building up candidates. Begin training candidates. Like, this is our guy. This is our candidate. This is who we stood by this person when they were an alderman or where they were in city council or whatever. So we want to push him or her for whatever, senator or congressman, right? So understanding like the complete picture locally is very, very important. And then investing in that young talent that could go on to become whatever, a mayor or congressman or senator is super important.
And I think that's let's talk about moving forward, right? What are we going to do now?
Right.
And I would love to figure out ways for us to work together to, number one, build the bench in our Muslim community, right? Candidate training. Identify those superstars in our community that we know can go into office, whether it be on the library board, in county commissioner, for God's sakes, did they change the Dearborn city clerk yet? Is
No.
it the same? I mean, come on.
It's
friend.
still the same guy.
Still the
Same
same
guy.
guy.
Listen, that's how many elections I worked. It's always been the same guy. And so I think those are the things. Like, can we think together about who are the people that we have identified as great organizers, leaders in the community that we could start training, train campaign managers. That's the other thing we need. Not just the candidates, but we need people in our community who are able to run campaigns, right? Comms people in our community, people who can lead field operations, more people who understand how to use the voter activation network. You can't really mobilize voters without the access to the voter file.
Right.
And so now we have access. We have the entire country. We have access to the voter file, but we need people trained to use the voter file.
Yeah.
So how do we then invest in training our people, building a political bench, making sure that we have candidates available to run in these races, thinking about the one to give you even something, as someone who thinks that I know a lot of things. I was shocked this year when the whole Huwaida Araf thing happened with the university board, because that's not something available to me in New York.
Right.
We don't have that in New York, so I didn't know.
Yeah, they can change the rules whenever they want.
Yeah, if I knew about it,
I mean,
would've
but I've been like pushing people because that was such an important race. Only
Right.
2 states allow it.
So-
Michigan and I think like one other one. Everywhere else, the governor appoints them, right?
Yeah.
But even if the governor appoints them, if you're giving contributions to a governor, who are you going to put on your school board?
Yeah,
Who
these
are you going to
better
put on
be
the
demands,
NYU
yeah.
school board, right? With everything going on, like those asks need to happen because I promise you ask a governor, a candidate in any state, any Arab or Muslim that goes, who are you going to put on your school board? They're going to be shocked. Usually it goes to like the top donors.
Right.
You know, like
Of course.
the Illich is
We
out
should
here.
be
Get
to-
the,
Yeah.
We should be putting forth. We're not asking for favors of anybody. We're saying put the most qualified people in our community in these positions, especially with governments claiming diversity and inclusion. Well, why is there always diversity and inclusion without us? I mean, are we
And-
somehow not in that
And,
equation?
and Michigan has good examples because a university like Wayne State University in Detroit, which I would say half of the student body
I was there today
is-
doing outreach.
Yeah.
50% of the
is
sisters
Muslim,
were hijabis.
Arab, right?
Yeah.
And they have no representation on the board of governors. So, I mean, this is a direct impact that we're
well, we
seeing.
have a history. I mean, Brian Musalam from Dearborn was the first statewide elected.
Michigan State, right?
He was the Michigan
Yeah.
State Board of Trustee, and
And then what happened? Why we stopped after that?
not a lot of people understood. That's why, like, many of us were trying to get the national support for Huwaida because it's a difficult thing to understand if you're not from here that you can run
Right.
for a region. You know, like, but you know, she put up a good showing, and I think really
Oh,
got screwed
alhamdulillah,
over
I
at the
mean-
end for whatever reason. But look, Brian came in and he won the trustee race, you know, many years ago. But like, there's still Wayne State, there's Eastern Michigan,
Right.
there's so many other universities where you can go in. And then in other states, again, with everything happening on college campuses, governors should be able to put out there
Yeah.
who they're putting on these boards. Just look at Texas, who Abed puts on the boards.
Yep.
I mean,
Right.
I've been looking, I mean, after this whole university board thing, and I went to do the research, and I found, for example, in New York, it's the governor appoints, and I was looking, I was like, where do our kids, where's the representation for our young people? So encouraging us to start doing the research, to be more well-informed. I think the responsibility is not going to be on every single individual in our community, but on us. I mean, I'm saying that about myself too, like I need to know more because I didn't know about that.
No, I think all of us do. I think one of the key things that we really have to address is we need to stop having these blips of power.
Right.
Where
Yeah,
it's like
that's not
a
gonna
short,
work.
you know, burst, and then you go back to your sambusa and your biryani and your chai, right? We have to cultivate a culture.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's one thing I want you guys to speak to a little bit because I don't know what the showing is going to be tomorrow. I'm hoping it's going to be good, but I know that there's been a lot of new energy and a lot of new momentum that has come within the community, a lot of interest in engaging in the electoral process, right? How do we capitalize? How do we ensure that potential energy turns into kinetic energy?
Inshallah. I will say this, Rex, like, you know, alhamdulillah, like, you know, a lot of people have done really good work, and there is a lot of sentiment, a lot of conversations about making sure our people go to the polls. There are a lot of local candidates who are doing their own work to bring people out. Khalas, when people go to the polls, then they get to see the whole ballot, right? So you obviously, if you go to the polls, we know our community is going to engage in voting. But I also have grace for our people. Like, you know, our people are living in deep trauma, you know, in deep grief. Like, even for myself, like, I'm an organizer. This is what I do. I do this all day, every day, 7 days a week. And wallahi, I'm traumatized.
Yeah.
Even in this election, I've been triggered so many times, like, because I feel like a sense of responsibility as a leader. And to be honest with you, I sit with myself often to say, am I doing the right thing? Am I not doing the right thing? Am I doing right by my people? Am I not doing right by my people? Like, I don't actually know. And only Allah knows, and Allah will judge whether we're doing what's right for our people, whether I, as an individual, should have been doing more, should I have said this, should I have done that? Like, I don't know. I feel conflicted. I mean, this is the first time ever where I have not been so confident in my own leadership in this moment.
I think that's a feeling everyone has.
And so I just say to our communities, like, we really want you to come outside to vote, and we know that you have a lot of deep grief, and I do too. And I can't stop thinking about, you know, just in like the last 40 hours, there was a attack on a school, 50 children were killed.
6 hospitals.
Six hospitals. They're talking about executing the staff that did not take the orders of evacuating one of the hospitals there. So I just want people to know that we're not just having this like empty conversation about, oh, politics. We know what you're feeling. We know that our people are being murdered. We know that there is trauma in Lebanon and that the people of southern Lebanon are experiencing some of what we have seen in Gaza for the last year or so. We know that people are hurt. We know that people don't believe in the system. We know that you have felt betrayed by Democrats and Republicans, but we're asking you to come outside. Let them see that we are a people that are going to be counted this election. That you're, when someone looks up, Samia al-Jahmi, that next to your name it says you voted. When Muhammad Lahan goes to the polls, they're going to look and say Muhammad Lahan from East Dearborn voted. I'm making those names up, by the way. But being able to say that our people participated, right? It's no one in any campaign, whether it's a Trump campaign, Jill Stein, Kamala Harris, no one's going to be able to know who you voted for.
Correct.
But they will know that you voted.
That you voted.
And that's what I want our people to understand, that these people will look and they're going to start making decisions in the future based on whether or not they think that we are a community that is going outside. So I want you to know we're asking you to do something that we know is hard. That you feel like some people are saying, okay, third party, I understand why people are saying that, but we all know, that probably is not going to send somebody to the White House. It doesn't matter. Just go vote. Whatever you want to do, just please do not stay home tomorrow. There are some folks running, for school board. You have Jamal al-Jahmi, who's a Yemeni American who's running for school board. You have Amir Zahid, who's running for school board in Dearborn. There is Russia, who's running for University State Board. Michigan, right? U of M, Michigan. Michigan.
Wayne State.
Wayne State. Sorry, Wayne State. So Russia's running for Wayne State. So again, just I know it's through grief, it's through outrage that we have, but I just want our people to be counted. I just want them to say, MashaAllah, East Dearborn went outside. That the people of the Muslims of Dearborn Heights, they went outside. The Muslims of Canton, the Muslims of Inkster, the Muslims of alhamdulillah, our people keep saying Dearborn, but our people are in a lot of places in Michigan.
All over Michigan.
They're all over Michigan.
This is something I have to dispel to the media. I say there's a lot of Muslims in Dearborn and Hamtramck, but there's almost 300,000 Muslims in Michigan. They're not all in Dearborn.
No,
Dearborn's got the best food.
Canton, Novi.
No disagreement.
Livonia. There's so many Muslims. Believe it or not, I was in Saginaw.
Grand Rapids.
Grand Rapids is
like Ann Arbor.
Ann
We
Arbor.
have friends that live in, we have a lot of, Syrian American families who, for example, live around the West Bloomfield, around the Muslim Center, or whatever it's called, the Muslim Unity Center. And so they're in West Bloomfield. So our people are everywhere. So please, just get up through the grief, through the rage, through all of the feelings. I have so many mixed emotions, wallahi. For me, no matter what, my emotions are going to probably be the same regardless. But I just want our people to just go through all of the emotions that you have. Please go into a polling site. No one's going to be with you in the polling site, but just be counted.
And I say this, I say to people, look, if you want to leave a blank ballot, go ahead, but at least put it through the tabulator, so your name is counted. And it shows out that this Muslim voted. We ensure our collective safety through our vote.
That's right. Don't leave your ballot blank.
No, do not do that.
Don't
I'm
do
not
it. At
encouraging
least check.
people
Because
to,
you have great down ballot
Yes.
candidates on the race. He's just kidding. He's saying that he just wants you to be counted.
I want you to
counted.
be counted. You have to be counted at the very least. That's the bare minimum.
That's right.
The bare minimum is to not sit on
Don't be
election
home.
Exactly.
day.
No,
Don't be
you can't
home.
do that.
And take somebody. That's the other thing about us. We're such good, Muslims, we're all like the mother-in-law, your wife, your sister-in-law, some of you have children who are over the age of 18. Make it a family affair.
Right.
And that's the way, and I know that people are going to think this is, outlandish what I'm about to say, but there's some part of this that tells me that if we can't do the basic thing of being counted in this election, for our Palestinian sisters and
that's a way
brothers.
to record the genocide.
Yes,
by
it
the
is.
way.
Imagine the story, Rex. The day after elections, it said they look at the Muslim turnout, right? And for example, they say, whoa, 20% increase of Muslim voters in this election. People are going to know why.
Right.
This is the story, people. The story is going to be you are so moved by genocide, and you have made this your red line. You got up and went to the polls.
Right.
Because you may have stayed home before,
Right.
you may not have been motivated before, but this has moved you to go to the polls. And I just want them to say, the Muslims, wait a minute, something is brewing, something's shifting. The Muslims are now understanding that this is the political power we require. So inshallah, in the future, we can prevent genocides. Because right now, we have not been able to do that.
And we can be a red line before the red line needs to even be drawn.
Look, the Arab Muslim community's got to understand other communities are coming out. Jocelyn Benson, I think today posted the numbers of first-time voters, college voters. I mean, they're through the roof. Like they're very impressive in the state of Michigan for the first, particularly around the first-time voters. And we can pretty much guess first-time voters are, college students are thinking about Gaza, right? So you have other voters that are coming out. It would be a shame if the Arab Muslim voters in the state did not come out, right? And look at the past year, right? When the genocide started, as I mentioned earlier, people at work started speaking up, and what they do, they silence them by firing them. People started posting on Instagram, Facebook, Meta. What they do once the posts started going viral, they silence them by removing them. We went to protests, we went to rallies. These folks are anti-Semitic. They silence you by calling you that, right? Everywhere we turn to speak up over the past year, they've been silencing us. This is your one time to speak up where they can't silence you.
Correct.
This is it. This is your one time. This is the last.
No repercussions.
No
right?
repercussions. They cannot take that away from you. They will not attack voting rights or our ability to vote in this country. And they cannot do it. And even if they did do it, they wouldn't succeed in the way they can by pulling down a Facebook account. So it's important to remember that. This is our opportunity to speak up in all the times we've been silenced over the past year. And as you said, privately in the voting booth.
Right.
No one's going to know, but get out there and fill out the down ballot races if you want to skip the top, whatever. Just fill it out, submit it so we can get these numbers up.
So this is going to be the last question, but I think it's arguably one of the most important ones. November 6th, Donald Trump or Kamala Harris wins. What's the next step?
That's very simple for me, Rex. The next step is Joe Biden. That's a name that people are not bringing up. We have to remember that Joe Biden is still the president of the United States of America until the end of this year, and he needs all pressure, go back to all of our allies and say, look, whatever, the election's over now get back to where we were, let's end the genocide. Because I cannot wait till January, regardless of who goes to the White House. The Palestinian people cannot wait for us to be strategic, to wait for a good time. We got to get back to work. And there are still people who are still doing the work, like the young people, like the PYMs, like the students who have never taken their foot off the gas pedal. And we have to go back to joining them, going back to our labor allies, to our black-led organizations, to the undocumented folks in the movement, for all the people that have been with us, and say, we know that you were focusing on this election. We understand why everyone kind of pivoted for your own. Of course, everyone's going to work on their own best interests for their communities, but now we need you, and we need to go after Joe Biden to end this genocide. And then we continue to do that until January, and whoever goes to the White House, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, we got to rise up as a country. Us as Muslim Americans, as Arab Americans, as Palestinians, we need to be together. At the end of the day, unity, no egos, everybody put your leadership and organization to the side. There are people that have been counting on us for the last 13 and a half months for us to end this genocide, and we have not done it. And maybe what that means is that we got to ask ourselves, what more can we do?
Right.
More mass mobilization, more political organizing. And then, Rex, we got to start, you said this earlier, you can't wake up every 4 years. We have 2026 midterm elections. Can we as Muslims around the country focus on 15 districts where we have high concentrations of Muslims, where we say we're going to run people in primary elections who are pro-Palestine, who are supporting ending military aid to Israel, and we put everything we have behind those people. We win those primaries. We take them to a general election. Because one thing that we have, Rex, is we have the money in our community. We have the will of our people. What they just need is coordination and organization. And what they love in our community to see actually is they love to see our community working together. They love to see leaders working together across differences, where we can find something that we all agree on and put everything that we have on that. So we're working towards 2026, and then we got 2028. If we're looking for this from an electoral perspective, are we ready? What's the bench for 2028? Are we going to get into a conversation 4 years prior, so then when we get to 2028, that fitna is not there? We actually found ourselves, wait a minute, we're all on the same page.
We don't want to wake up in August.
No August, no fitna, nope, we're all together. And guess what? For those who don't want to be aligned, there's a pact that says you stay quiet and you let us do the leading over here. I really think that our community has the potential, but we got to start now. And like you said, consistency and persistency is the key to our community building that power.
Exactly. Look, I don't think tomorrow or after is going to be celebratory in any way. I'm anticipating a very somber feel for many in our community. I think it's going to be emotional for a lot of people because it does in a way signify and mark an end of a horrible, horrible administration. I think the emotions are going to rush over a lot of people that, you know, we've come this far, but we have a lot more work to do. Putting the pressure on Biden, I mean, we have to continue doing that, but look, there's going to be some challenges and realities, you know, depending on whether if Trump comes in, if Harris comes in, what are the demands we have on them, you know, whether publicly or behind the scenes, or what are the pushes for changing in policy, breaking away from the administration, and at the same time keeping the pressure on Biden. And there has to be a lot of coordination in the weeks that follow. In 2016, you know, there was a lot of coordination before Trump was elected between the organizations on what our contingency plan is, how we're going to operate. My concern is we're not seeing that as much now because we're all, rightfully so, our attention is on the genocide, right? But there's going to be some serious questions that we have to sit back and answer and analyze policy-wise and strategy-wise after the results come in. Again, I take it like, look, it's not going to be celebratory. It's not going to be something that we're going to be, you know, pumping our fists and saying, great job, okay, you know, what do we have to do next? Like, what is the... But it does mark an end of a chapter. It marks an end of a horrible administration. And a run that has been draining for so many people. You know, like the work Linda and others have put in the past year has been really emotional. I think it's going to signify the end of that chapter. And now we'll have clarity on
what's next.
And for me, that clarity on, okay, this is the winner. Now we can really mobilize and organize for the next few years.
And I just want to say one more thing, Rex. This is really for our people, and I've seen this before. It hurts my feelings, and I think it hurts the Palestinian people. Please, to our community, when there's a ceasefire, because eventually that will have to happen, please don't just go back to normal. And we've done that before. We did that in 2021. We did that in 2014. Like, I don't want it to be that our community will require the bloodshed of the Palestinian people to rise up and do the work. So please, when there's a ceasefire, that's when the real work starts, actually. That's when we start working towards the pathway to rebuild Gaza and to truly fight for what the Palestinian people deserve, and that is a free and liberated Palestine. Sure. And they don't want, they're not just asking you for ceasefire, because they are a people who are, you know, understand that even when losing their loved ones and their family, that they're all martyrs, and they understand that, they know it's Allah's, you know, will. But at the same time, they're looking for us to build this power to help them get what they deserve in this life. And that is freedom, just the same freedom and privilege that we have here as Muslim Americans in this country, to do this work, to speak, to live, to be able to, you know, give our children access to things that maybe our parents didn't have access to. Like, my parents are Palestinian immigrants who came to this country so that I could have the things that they knew I wouldn't be able to have under a military occupation. So I implore our Muslim communities, please don't go back to normal when there is a ceasefire, because that is the most devastating thing that we could do, to betray the Palestinian people, to say now you're no longer being killed in the hundreds, so now we're just going to go back to wait till another onslaught happens for us to rise up. Please, let's stay consistent. Let's continue the work regardless of whether there is an active genocide or not, because the Palestinian people are going to need us even more when there is a ceasefire.
Yes. And as the Rasul ﷺ says, the best of deeds are those small and done consistently.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Yeah,
I mean,
Sister Linda, Brother Abed, thank you so much for joining us. May Allah reward you for all your efforts, and thank you for the conversation. And may Allah guide us to the best path for us as a community and for the people of Gaza, inshallah, tomorrow and after tomorrow. For those of you who joined us live, Jazakumullah khair, thank you so much. We're going to come back, inshallah, with more live coverage tomorrow of the elections as well. But may Allah strengthen us as a community and deliver us, inshallah.
Ameen.
Jazakumullah khair.